are all about the insurance member population. And I'll talk a little bit about those in the next few minutes.
Hello, I'm Caroline Leeds, and I've been invited to share with you my experiences of the Tasmanian devil insurance meta population from a zoo community perspective. My involvement in the programme began in 2003 at a stakeholder inclusive workshop in Launceston, Tasmania, where the Tasmanian government hosted a stakeholder inclusive meeting to share what was known about the emerging disease issue in Tasmanian devils, and really to discuss what should be done about it and to get some idea about who might be able to help and how. One of the outcomes of this was an agreement between the Regional Zoo Association, my employer at the time, and the Tasmanian government to establish a small insurance population, the purpose of which was to provide the basis for a backstop against catastrophic wild decline, while further research was being carried out on the nature and impact of the disease. At the time, it was envisaged that this might take around 5 years, after which we would expect to know whether a more substantial insurance population would be required or not. So we designed an insurance population to retain 90% of wild source gene diversity for 10 years, standard targets, which required about 30 wild founders and the space to grow these to a population size of 120 to 150 animals. Regional zoos, who were members of the Zoo Association at the time, took up this challenge and committed the required resources, and this became the start of the current insurance programme. Then in 2007, a government-organised scientific forum at which the zoo community was represented reviewed the information gathered to date from the field and concluded that based on available data and related disease modelling, extinction of the devil in 25 to 30 years had become a distinct possibility. Now, because we were there in the room and listening to the arguments and data presented, we were able to see immediately that the insurance population that we were building would not be sufficient to cope with that prognosis. And so we put forward a new strategy and worked closely with government representatives to refine it, taking advantage of the information that they had on what developments might be possible in Tasmania over the coming months and years. The resulting strategy, which was collaboratively developed, aimed to build a population of devils that would be disease-free, that would be genetically representative of the species, able to sustain a harvest of animals for release, able to maintain a suite of associated flora and fauna, so those commensal, symbiotic and parasitic organisms normally associated with the devil in the wild, and able to maintain wild behaviours. It was expected that a population with these characteristics would be capable of sustaining the species through an extinction event and towards full ecological recovery over a 50-year period. So using population biology theory and other science-based input, we determined that the ideal population would be founded on around 150 wild-caught founders, growing to 1,500 to 5,000 animals, depending on management intensity. And also, we determined that ideally animals would be spread across a meta-population comprising captive, free-ranging systems and protected wild sites, integrated through strategic animal exchanges to optimise whole system viability and performance. And this became the basis for the current insurance meta-population strategy. In 2008, following this redesign, CBSG was engaged to facilitate a stakeholder-inclusive workshop aimed at identifying where and how this new strategy would be implemented. 40 participants, including researchers, field staff, policymakers, cultural leaders and zoo representatives, worked for 4 days in Hobart to develop an action plan for programme implementation. 4 years later, in 2012, the meta population has grown from a population of around 85 intensively managed individuals held in traditional zoo facilities to around 520 animals held both in traditional captive facilities but also in an expanding number of extensively managed free-range pens. Further to this, in line with 2008 PHVA recommendations, 2012 will see the start of the extension of the insurance programme into protected wild locations on islands and fenced peninsulas in Tasmania. This progression in the programme will move the project beyond extinction prevention and into full ecological recovery. And Andy's going to talk a little bit more about the logistics of this. Thank you.
Hi again. Look, I'm going to quickly talk about the current priorities of the program, and they've been really guided by the work that we've done with our partners, and in particular with CBSG and the work that's been done on the strategic framework for the insurance meta population. These are about securing devils in the landscape as part of that insurance population. Landscape isolation projects are a series of projects that involve either preventing disease getting into populations or removing a diseased population, securing an area, and then reintroducing a healthy population into that area. The other aspect of this, of course, is offshore islands. We have spent the last 2 years working on a proposal to establish a population of devils on Malara Island. It's a just under 10,000 hectare island national park, again, on the east coast of Tasmania. And we received approval for that proposal in June this year, and at this stage our plans are to release the first lot of animals on the island around November. We'll release up to 50 animals and let that population build naturally, with supplementing that population every 3 to 5 years with 1 or 2 animals. And the work that Caroline's been doing with biobasis models is giving us a really good indication of the number of animals and the amount of supplementation we'll need to maintain genetic diversity in that island population. Again, it's all linking together back to that meta population approach. I'd just like to close with a few quick comments around collaborations. The State of Tasmanian Devil Program has been able to deliver fantastic outcomes in the last 4 years, and that really has come on the back of some extremely strong and genuine relationships and partnerships that we have across the globe. As I said before, we have a fantastic research community which is constantly working to try and peel back the layers of understanding and shed light on what it is that DFTB is doing, how it works and how it affects Tasmanian devils, and what opportunities may lie for vaccines or treatments or genetic resistance. And they're continuing to work in that space, and it's really important that we encourage and facilitate and collaborate effectively with those researchers. The Zoo and Aquarium Association have been outstanding in their ability to respond rapidly and to engage effectively and quickly with the program. The insurance population reached targets 3 years ahead of schedule. We have now in excess of 500 animals in intensive captive facilities. And as I've talked about earlier in the presentations, we're well on the way to realising some of the outcomes in these areas that were identified in 2008 the landscape scale isolation projects, the pre-ranging projects. I really believe that conservation programs like this can be delivered really effectively if you have the right people in the room at the right time. No government or no organisation has all the skill sets that are required to take on a project of this scale, and it's therefore really important that we recognise that early and engage with the right people. If you do that, you can identify what has to be done, and then it's about going about getting on with the job. And my focus for the last 4 years has very much been getting on with the job. And I personally feel extremely proud to have worked with the partners that I've had the opportunity to work with. In particular, I'd like to thank Caroline and the team at CBSG, because their understanding of this really complex material around population management and their ability to communicate that to me has given me a very clear sense of what I need to do, and I can apply my strengths to delivering on the ground the outcomes that are directed and guided by the work of CBSG. So on that note, I'd like to wish you all well, and thank you very much for listening.
Hi, so I'm going to talk now very briefly about the real advantages that I've seen in taking a one-plan approach in this particular instance, again from the captive community perspective. And I thought that the one thing that I would share with you was a very particular case of where I think a piece of information arose in the field and research community which might not otherwise have made its way into the captive community, but which had a huge impact on program design and on the cost of the captive program. So essentially, when we first designed the insurance program strategy, we had imagined that we would only have about 2 years worth of access to wild caught founders. And this led us to prepare to grow very rapidly to very large numbers in captivity. Now that's a really expensive undertaking because each devil can cost somewhere between $4,000 and $8,000 per year to maintain. And so ramping up to very large numbers over a 2-year period or a 3 or 4 year period is a very significant undertaking. Now, during the PHVA, when we had everybody together in the room, just entirely by accident, the results of some recent vertical transmission trials just popped up in the conversation. And what we learned was that it is possible to take very young devils from diseased populations and to quarantine them and then be confident that they won't develop disease during their lifetime. And what this means for us is that we can keep the captive population smaller for longer, and we can meet our gene diversity targets through regular supplementation from the wild. And so we changed our strategy a little bit to accommodate that, and that's made a significant impact on the cost of the project over the next, say, 5 to 10 years. And that's huge. And I think that that's a really good example of how you really need people to be talking together about how programs are managed from all of the different perspectives in order to make full use of the information that's available. And I mean, just in a general way, I guess I've found that there have been some real synergies emerging from developing a shared understanding between captive and field workers and also researchers of the various different perspectives within the program. I think that's really given rise to some interesting ideas and innovations in the project. And so in general, I think taking a long-term approach has really allowed us to build a more cost-efficient and better targeted insurance program than we might otherwise have been able to develop. And I think and I really hope that this has had similar advantages at the field end. Thanks for listening.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Caroline, even though you can't hear me. We're actually hoping that Caroline will take part in the panel discussion later on via Skype. Whether or not it will work, we'll see, but it would be nice. So there you go, you've seen a beautiful example of a one-plan approach to species conservation planning, with the emphasis being on this having been the intensively managed population being part of an open meta-population, so it's not a closed population as many captive populations used to be in the past, but an open managed population, meaning that the days that zoos and aquariums where solely Noah's Arks are over, let's bury them and move on. So open meta-populations, and then all stakeholders and all available resources were integrated into this planning approach from the start. So the goals of the one-plan approach, quickly, it will enhance global collaboration and communication in all aspects of species conservation planning, hopefully. It will also accelerate the evolution of species conservation planning tools. This is actually one aspect of the work of the Conservation Breeding Specialist Group. You may all be familiar with PHBAs and Vortex and things like that, so hopefully this one-plan approach will enhance this work. And then also contribute significantly to the achievement of the IG biodiversity targets. And what do we want from you guys now in the panel discussion? So if you are planning a species conservation planning exercise, if you are planning the planning, so to speak, then consider including representation from across the spectrum of management of populations from the very beginning. Also, we invite you to make use of the Conservation Breeding Specialist Group and also, of course, the Species Conservation Planning Subcommittee. They are both there to help you with these things, to get you together with relevant experts on the other side, so to speak. If you don't really know who to contact us in the beginning, and we can make contacts with the other people you might want to consider integrating into your planning. And also please help us to further the development of the one plan approach. Take part in the panel discussion, or else contact Oni at the Species Pavilion or via email, and Mark of course as well, both sitting here in the audience. Thank you very much. Sorry, no, not yet. I wanted to show you some nice photos in the end. So, these are actually all examples of one plan approaches already. So you can see the hornbill here, where the zoo and aquarium community is actually helping with rearing of chicks or second clutches. The African penguin, we have Margaret Rostock here from Sankoff as well sitting in the room, and they are helping us rearing chicks of the African penguin for release into the wild. And then we have the Kihansi spray toad, of which there are only a couple of individuals apparently left in a cage somewhere in the wild, and then the rest is in intensive management at the moment. Blue-eyed black lemur, which is the latest example, perhaps from one plan approach we just did, a species conservation strategy for all lemur species 4 weeks ago in Madagascar, with representatives from intensively managed populations being present and taking part in this whole exercise from the start. And there will be a chapter about managed populations in this conservation strategy, which we, by the way, did following Mark's guidelines in the handbook. So, thank you very much. That's it now, and I hand over to Liz Bennett. Sorry, to John first.
So, Christoph Schwitzer, Ani Byers, Carolyn Lees, Andrew Sharman, thank you very much, in absentia as well. Okay, so what we've had is a number of presentations that really focus on single species and how you integrate all those elements of single species. As Christoph said in his presentation, the goal in some sense is a fully conserved species. And so the challenge, another challenge as we go through the species planning process, is to think about what a fully conserved species is. And Elizabeth Bennett will talk about the definition of a fully conserved species, and not only looking at goals for individual species, but goals for whole portfolios of species conservation. Chris.
Thank you very much, John. Okay, as you've heard, I'm going to be talking about planning for long-term goals and proposing how we might start to develop within the IUCN system a process for saying what those goals are, but having scientifically rigorous ways of determining and measuring them. So for all species planning, what's the primary goal? What are we trying to achieve here? A lot of conservation biology, legislation and policy, including the whole IUCN readiness process, focuses that the first priority is avoiding extinction. And clearly it is. What we heard for the Tasmanian devil is absolutely critical. We've got to stop those guys going extinct in the wild. And so we basically are trying to stop them all, becoming like these species here. And, but that's not quite enough. Successful species conservation is so much more than that. Successful species conservation should be the species that we're looking at here. It's conservation of species in ecologically significant numbers out there in the environment, interacting fully with the full suite of other native species and processes there. So we've got predation, we've got browsing, we've got pollination, we've got dispersal, all there, and that's what a fully conserved species looks like. It's out there doing all these really cool things. and only then will ecosystems be providing all the multiple services that we've been hearing about in other sessions earlier this week, as well such as clean water, clean air, as fully thriving systems, and also supporting local livelihoods by having enough of the resources out there for sustainable use as well. Now, this ecologically out there is reflected already in some vision statements for species. So, for example, here's the IUCN plan for the North American bison, and the vision for that here is the ecological recovery of the North American bison is going to occur when you get multiple large herds moving freely across extensive landscapes, interacting in ecologically significant ways with the fullest possible set of other species. And I jotted down in the last two presentations as well, similar thing, robust sawfish populations in thriving aquatic ecosystems, and Tasmanian devils enduring an ecologically functional population of Tasmanian devils in the wild. So visions for species are clearly heading that way. Just last month, WCS with its partners in Argentina was doing some species planning using the IUCN species planning process to come up with a vision for guanacos. We envision multiple ecologically functional subpopulations of guanacos within a matrix that maintains connectivity.